Hello, welcome back to Planet 40k. We've got another video for you today, and we're going to be talking about the top 15 tips for Necron players. Now, before getting into today's video, 50% of you guys have still yet to subscribe to the channel. So if you are one of those people, hit the subscribe button below. It will do me a massive favour in terms of the channel's growth. And if you've already done that, thank you very much. Also, before jumping into this 15 tips, we've brought back the animations. So I'll be jumping off camera. I'll be back at the end of the video. But let's get on with the top 15 tips. So the first tip for Necron players: if you want to buy some Necron warriors, simply do not buy them individually. Now there is a reason for this. Now if you're in the UK, Necron warriors are £30 for the box. That does include 3 Scarab swarms. However, what you should be doing is looking at the Recruit Edition box set. And for only £2.50 more, you'll get your warriors, but you'll also get a Royal Warden. You'll still get your 3 Scarab swarms, alongside a Space Marine Lieutenant, and also 5 Assault Intercessors. Then furthermore, you get some bits and bobs within the box as well. But the main part of this, the Space Marine side, you can simply whack on eBay and get half your money back. And that Royal Warden is just an extra bonus as well. Now tip number 2, sticking with those Scarabs in particular from this box set. Scarabs should be in almost every single list that you play. They're absolutely amazing. They're probably one of the best units in the Necron Codex. Potentially one of the best units pound for pound or point for point in the entire 40k game. Now they're only 15 points a base, 4 wounds, 4 attacks, pretty speedy, and when you've got things like objectives secured within the Hilak Dynasty or Eternal Conquerors, they can be an absolute nightmare for your opponent to play against, because they're going to be stealing points and they're going to be scoring you a lot of primary points and potentially even getting you some secondary points as well. So always make room in your list with Canoptic Scarabs. Don't leave home without them. Now point number 3, it kind of does relate to Necron warriors in a sense, because they're the best at reanimation protocols, but we're just talking about reanimation protocols in general here. And what a lot of players seem to forget, that you actually can steal a lot of movement when you're reanimating your models. So take this example here, we've got 5 Necron warriors left in a unit. If 2 were to die during your opponent's shooting phase, and you manage to reanimate both of them, you don't need to keep them in the same position. You can actually put them at the front of the unit. So you can get really tricksy with these kind of things, especially when there's objectives to be held. You can move them within 3 inches of an objective. All of a sudden, you've got objective secured warriors, and then you could be gaining primary points, maybe stealing primary points, which is one of the great things about Necrons. They're really good at scoring points, and this is one of the ways of doing it. On to number 4, I wanted to talk about the My Will Be Done ability. Now this comes on your Overlord models. A few characters that have got the My Will Be Done ability, the Catacomb Command Barge and of course the Silent King, all have the My Will Be Done ability. This is going to allow core units to be able to add 1 to their hit roll. That's in both the shooting phase as well as the fight phase. Now this is pretty key, because a lot of units now in the Necron Codex have the core keyword since that update we had last year. And whether you're playing a shooting dynasty or whether you're playing a melee based dynasty, either way you're going to want +1 to your hit roll, so you want to be hitting on 2s wherever possible. Now on to number 5, speaking of HQs in general, make sure you're selecting the right HQ for your list. Now a lot of times in our Discord, where we've got a list channel within the Discord server where people put their list down and they say, Planet 40k, please check out my list, give me some pointers, give me some tips. And they'll have an Overlord with a Scorpion Destroyer unit. And that's the synergy they're planning on. They want the Scorpion Destroyers hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, but it's not going to work, and here is why. The Scorpion Destroyers are going to be moving 8 inches, whereas the Necron Overlord will be moving 6. So for the first turn, this may not make much of a difference unless you're advancing your Scorpion Destroyers, then you're probably going to lose out with your Overlord, but eventually during the game, your Overlord is going to be dragging behind, or is going to be holding your Scorpion Destroyers back. So you need something quicker, such as a Locust Lord, a Scorpion Lord, maybe even a Catacomb Command Barge to go with your Scorpion Destroyers, or potentially one of the cryptic models such as a Chronomancer or a Technomancer with a Canoptic Cloak. So you just got to make sure you've got the right HQs for the right units. Now tip number 6 is simply selecting the correct secondary objectives for your list. Again, I'm going to revert back to the Discord. Only recently I've seen some of the lists with secondary objectives attached to the list, where they've selected R&D or behind enemy lines, engage on all fronts, but there's no models that can actually get behind enemy lines or score that R&D in the enemy quarters. So really, to be able to score those kind of objectives, of course you're going to need either quick units, or you're going to need deep striking units or tunneling in units if you like, with your Ophidian Destroyers. So flayed ones, Ophidian Destroyers, potentially Death Marks, and then all the quicker things such as Canoptic Wraiths, Scorpion Destroyers. They can go and do that kind of stuff, but if you padded out your list full of Immortals, don't expect your Immortals to be going right to the back end and scoring R&D. Now there's a few in particular that are pretty good from the Necron Codex that I wanted to highlight today. The first being Code of Combat. So you're scoring 3 points at the end of the battle for each enemy unit that was destroyed by a Necron's Noble. So if you're taking the Silent King for example, he's going to be scoring you tons of points with this secondary objective, especially if he's paired with a Catacomb Command Barge or an Overlord type of model. Then the second one I wanted to mention today, which is from the Battlefield Supremacy list, is Purge the Vermin. This one will score you tons of points, especially in smaller games, because your opponent simply cannot defend all 4 quarters in those smaller games, and even in the larger games. You're going to be chipping away at this, and you don't actually have to do much to score it, because it's all up to your opponent to defend you from actually getting the points. But you can be a little bit tricky with it. For example, if there's one enemy unit in 1 quarter, go targeting that unit to get that enemy unit out of that quarter, and then simply you score 2 points. It's a really important one, Purge the Vermin. I'd always advise taking it where possible. But in general, just make sure you're selecting the right secondary objectives. Another example being To the Last. Now if you've selected To the Last, 3 units in your list that are the most expensive in terms of points will score you 5 points if they remain alive at the end of the battle. Now, in some situations it could be your Scorbit Destroyers that are your most expensive unit in terms of points, and you don't want this to be the case because they're going to be going up front, slicing and dicing, and they've not got an in-run save. They're likely going to die at some point in the game, so you're throwing away points by selecting that secondary objective if you've not got the right units for that. So you want your more tankier units, maybe the Silent King, maybe some Ghost Arcs, maybe a large unit of Canoptic Wraiths, or even a 20-man unit of Necron Warriors, something that's going to last all game. If you've not got any of those in your list, then you simply shouldn't be selecting To the Last as a secondary objective. Now there's plenty more examples I can go through, but we're going to move on to point number 7. And point number 7 is Play the Mission. Now as already mentioned earlier in the video, Necrons are very good at scoring points. Now they're not the most meta in terms of tabling your opponent's army. That position is currently being held by the Tyranids, so don't go expecting to be tabling anyone. However, you need to be playing the mission. Read the mission very carefully, very clearly, and just play towards it, because we're quite a resilient army when we want to be. So if you've got your Necron Warriors in a group of 20, again, get your Ghost Arcs, get your Resurrection Orbs, get your Technomancers, your Canoptic Reanimators. Do everything you can to keep those warriors alive while they're holding objective points. And we've already mentioned how the secondaries work. Make sure you're scoring those as well. Now we do have to bear in mind that very shortly there's going to be a new chapter approved book coming out, which is Warzone Nephilim. So expect some changes to the actual mission objectives, as well as some secondaries there as well. Now hopefully the Necrons actually get something out of this, because we're the cover boys of this chapter approved book. On to tip number 8 is play to your dynasty strengths. So if you're playing the Mephrit Dynasty, make sure you've got shooty lists, and make sure you're defending those shooty units within your list with screens such as your Canoptic Scarabs. If you're playing the Nihilak Dynasty, make sure you've got things that can actually hold objectives, because they're going to get targeted, because your opponent is not going to like the fact that you've got army-wide OBSEC. If you're playing the Novak Dynasty, you're going to have melee options, so play to the strength of your dynasty. If you've got kind of a mixed bag in terms of your list build, maybe you've got a bit of everything, then maybe consider the Zarkin Dynasty, because that can do everything, and it does get that 5+ feel no pain save against mortal wounds, which is actually coming more and more crucial as the game goes on, especially at the current time with Tyranids running the show, throwing out mortal wounds left, right and centre. So that would be tip number 8, play to your dynasty code strengths. So number 9, this only relates to if you know who your opponent is going to be and what they're going to be using in terms of their army. So as an example, I'm going to be showing you the warriors here, and you've got the option of the Strength 5 Gorse Reaper or the Strength 4 Gorse Flayers. Now the Flayers are 24-inch for rapid fire, and the Gorse Reapers are only 12-inch but they're Strength 5. So if you're going up against Space Marines, for example, which are standardly toughness 4, you're likely going to be needing the Gorse Reapers because they're Strength 5, so you're going to be wounded on 3s. The Gorse Flayers are going to be wounded on 4s, although you do get the extra range with that. Now if you're going against toughness 3 factions such as Eldari for example, then those Gorse Reapers are probably too strong for them. You're not going to need them. You may as well go with the Gorse Flayers. You're getting a better range and you're still going to be wounding on 3s. So it's all about knowing who you're going up against and selecting the correct weapon. Here's another common comparison, which is the Immortals. They've got the option of the Gorse Blaster or the Tesla Carbine. Gorse Blaster being Strength 5, again if you're going up against Space Marines it's probably better. It's got a bit of AP, although the Armour of Contempt does slightly nullify it and does make them a little bit more similar to Tesla. But if you're going up against factions that have got a really weak armour save, then you don't need the AP, so Tesla is actually much better against those factions, especially with those exploding 6s. You're going to get more hits there, and hopefully more wounds and more dead models. Number 10 and number 11 kind of go hand in hand, but number 10 relates more to the blast ability. Now I personally hate the blast ability in terms of the Necron Codex anyway. We've got 2 units in the heavy support section of the Codex that I absolutely despise because they've got the blast keyword within their profiles. The first one is the Canoptic Doomstalker and the second one is the Doomsday Arc. Both of them have the blast keyword built in with their weapons, and both of them are required to stay stationary if you want to use their higher profile within the weapon. So with the Canoptic Doomstalker's Doomsday Blaster, if you want to get that strength 10, that's 48 inches at minus 5 AP and d6 damage, you're going to need to stay still, otherwise it's going to only be 24 inches, only strength 8, minus 2 AP and d3 damage, so you lose quite a lot of stats if you do move with this thing. And likewise with the Doomsday Arc with the Doomsday Cannon, if you stay stationary, you got 72 inches, strength 10, minus 5 AP and d6 damage, and if you don't, it's still quite good at 36 inches, but only strength 8, minus 2 AP and d3 damage. Now these things are already quite unreliable as it is because they have d6 amount of shots, and then the damage being d6 or d3 if they move. By the time you've got to that stage, you've lost quite a lot of dice as it is. But why I'm advising you to ignore these two within your lists is simply because if they get tagged by a unit, no matter how small the unit is, they cannot fire the weapon. If I was going up against either of these units, I'd just make sure that I'm tagging them with any unit, it doesn't matter, and then they're pretty much redundant for the entire game. So then you've got to pay a tax to actually screen these guys, or you're going to have to move them, which actually nerfs the weaponry. So I'd advise not taking either of those, and the Locust Heavy Destroyers with the Gorse Destructors are just a better option in general. They can move, they can fly, and the damage average from one shot, if you can get it to hit and to wound, is going to be an average of 6 damage. And the next point was to basically ignore our super heavies. Now I'm not talking about the Silent King, that's in a different category in itself. I'm talking about the Necron Monolith and I'm talking about the Obelisk. Both of them are well overpriced. Okay, they've got some shiny little tools, such as the Death Rays for example, which does have a more fancier damage with D3 plus 3 per attack. And they're pretty good in combat as well, but you're paying 330 points for that model, and you're paying a command point as well because it's a Lord of War model. It's just not going to do enough, and it doesn't even have an inbound save either. Then as for the Obelisk, okay, it's got 28 wounds, it's going to have a lot of shots with the Tesla Spheres, but other than that, it's not doing much. It's not doing enough for 330 points. Highly advised not taking either of them if you're playing competitively. If you're playing narrative games, of course, bring them out, it's a fun game, but if you're going into tournaments, leave these things on the shelf. On to number 12, I've got the Katan Shards. I've got 2 points to talk about in terms of the Katan Shards. Now if you are going to be selecting some of these within your list, of course you need to have a detachment per Katan Shard, you probably know that already. But what I'd advise is make sure you're selecting the correct Katan powers. You don't want to be wasting your Katan powers, especially in the early rounds of the game, because in the later rounds it's likely going to be dead. So for example, if you're taking the Cosmic Fire Katan power, it's only 9-inch range. So for the first turn, maybe even the second turn, you're likely not going to be using it. So you're wasting the damage output there of mortal wounds. Some of the other ones, 24 inches, you're better off taking those. I personally like the Antimatter Meteor, that's a 24-inch range, or even the Times Arrow, that's 18-inch range. It's a little bit more usable than the 9 inches. Now if one of your Katan Shards is still alive turn 3, turn 4, then yeah, you've got that stratagem available to swap out your Katan power to get that Cosmic Fire if you wanted to, but for the start of the game at least, select the correct one. Then as for the second point with the Katan Shards, I personally would put them in strategic reserves. The current meta as mentioned, Tyranids with a lot of psychic shenanigans going off. You got the Thousand Suns doing things, you got the Grey Knights doing things. Katan Shards do not like the psychic phase. Now they can only lose 3 wounds per phase as a maximum, and they've only got 9 wounds. So if they lose 3 in the psychic phase and they lose 3 in the shooting phase, 3 in the fight phase, they're dead in a single turn. So against the current meta at the moment, I'd put them in strategic reserves. Your opponent is not going to know where it's coming out and not going to know when it's coming out, and when it does, it's going to be taking out something quite valuable to your opponent's list. Number 13, we're kind of sticking to the trend of those psychic factions, Thousand Suns, Tyranids and Grey Knights in particular. Make sure you're screening your units, and Scarabs are the best unit to screen because they're so cheap, 15 points, they're throwaway if you want them to be. Put these in front of your most important units that you want to protect, because psychic abilities such as Smite for example, they're going to be attacking the nearest enemy units. So if your Silent King is at the front of your army, he's going to be taking all those Smite attacks, whereas if he's surrounded by a lot of Scarab Swarms, then the Scarab Swarms are going to eat that damage, and you could even bring a Spider to be bringing those Scarab Swarms back. On to number 14, it's making use of some of our quicker things within our Codex, and I've got 3 examples here today. The first is the Veil of Darkness Relic. I never create a list that doesn't have a Veil of Darkness Relic, even if I've got to pay a command point with the Dynastic Heirloom stratagem, I always make sure I've got a Veil of Darkness within a list. Now what's so great about this is it can be used in the very first turn if you really wanted to. Now sometimes it isn't available because your opponent has screened off their deployment zone, but it can make your list a lot quicker than your opponent's going to expect. You could be throwing 20 warriors with an Overlord into the other end of the battle in the first turn. It could be the end of the game. Whenever you want them to go there, they can be there and they can be within range. You can further boost those abilities, such as using the Dimensional Sanctum Cryptic Arcana. and that's only 15 points to put that Arcana on, say, a Technomancer or a Chronomancer, so they can be meeting certain units in certain positions. So for example, if you've got 20 Flayed ones coming in into the enemy lines, they're going to be coming in on their own. They're not going to have any command protocols because there's no characters there. They're not going to have the My Will Be Done ability. They're not going to have an Invuln save. But if using the Veil of Darkness Relic or the Dimensional Sanctum Cryptek Arcana, you can say have a Chronomancer appear there out of nowhere, join them in the fight, give them a 5+ Invuln save and get them to reroll their charge roll. Then the third one is the Translocation Crypt. Now the Nephric Dynasty I've started to get my eye on because for most of this edition I've not really considered them. Even though my models are painted gold, I've always thought they were a bit below par, but now that we're not able to table our opponents anymore, we're playing for points and those secondaries are really important now. And this is one of the ways to score them. So if you've got that Deep Strike ability pre-game for only a single command point, and it can be used more than once because it's the start of the battle, it's not in a particular phase. So all of a sudden you could use this on, say, 2 different Immortal units and have them doing R&D. They can be behind enemy lines, they can be doing teleport homers in your opponent's deployment zone. All of a sudden your secondary objectives are a lot more open when you're using this stratagem in the Nephric Dynasty. So that's some of the ways I wanted to mention in terms of getting some speed into your list. Now of course you've got other ways, you've got the Night Scythe, again the Monolith, which isn't the best way, but these 3 in particular are going to be really key. Then the last top tip for Necron players is just don't forget your Living Metal. Countless times I've forgot Living Metal when I'm playing a game and it's come back to bite me, and it's simply been because of that one single wound that I've not added back in my own command phase due to Living Metal. It's very easy to forget. Maybe even put a certain dice out on the board so when it is your turn, that dice is going to remind you to do your Living Metal, because it's one of them things that I keep forgetting and maybe you do too. Let me know in the comments if you are one of those people that do forget Living Metal. So guys, that's our top 15 tips for Necron players. If I've missed anything, let me know below if you've got any tips you want to add, or alternatively join our Discord, the link will be in the description below. If you want some more Necron content, in the top right corner now there will be one of our previous videos, so if you've missed that one in previous weeks, check that one out now. Other than that guys, all that's left to say, thank you all for watching, I'll see you next time.